I'd like to thank everybody for coming out, particularly those of you who have not known me for most of your adult life, which a few people are in that category. And I'd like to thank you guys for coming out, too. So Year Zero is the story of a vast alien civilization that is so into our pop music that they accidentally commit the biggest copyright infringement since the Big Bang, thereby bankrupting the entire universe. All the wealth in the universe is owed to us humans, and as the story begins, we don't know it quite yet. Now, the aliens are in trouble because for reasons that are baked deep, deep, deep in the storyline, they're basically on the hook to honor our copyright laws. And we can basically save an enormous amount of time by suspending our disbelief on that point. Just sort of take that, for what it is. And this is a problem because they violated our copyright laws in a very, 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 very big way. And so not only are they on the hook to honor these copyright laws, but they're on the hook to pay the fines and penalties that are associated with violating them. And this is a problem because, to quote the most authoritative source really in the known universe on this subject, Aliens and Copyright, which is my own damn book, American copyright laws are the most cynical, predatory, lopsided, shamelessly money-grubbing copyright laws written by any society anywhere in the universe since the dawn of time itself. Now, that may sound like a strangely emphatic statement until you recall until you realize that the cost, the maximum fine for pirating a single copy of a single song in this country is $150,000. And to put that into perspective, the maximum fine for drunk driving in the state of California is 1/57th of that amount of money, which really makes sense if and only if you happen to believe that while drunk driving has terrible consequences, music piracy, to again quote my authoritative source, leads swiftly to meth addiction, human cannibalism, and societal collapse. And that's presumably what Congress was thinking when they passed that demented law. So also to put this in further perspective, because I always love a visual aid, tomorrow, if anybody cares to, you can go to Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm sorry about the colors on this. I was running out of colored ink, but the house is really awesome. And it's 6 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, and it sells for $137,000. So, to quote one of my particularly pissed off alien characters, Phoenix is the 6th largest city in the most powerful country on earth, and McMansions there cost less than a pirated copy of My Sharona. Nothing against My Sharona. I think it's a wonderful song, and I think the Knack are a great band. But so what happens in the book is a self-appointed alien delegation comes to Earth. I'm going to move this up a little bit. Comes to Earth, and they decide that they're going to try to fix this whole thing. And they quickly discover that the only way they can possibly do that is to reverse this huge, incredibly complicated thicket of laws and international treaties and all this stuff that literally goes back centuries. And they realize that in order to do this, if they're really going to do this, they're going to need an ally. They need to recruit a very, very special human being, somebody who has a couple of attributes. First of all, they need to get somebody who has ideally immense artistic credibility, because they assume that we revere our musicians just as much as they do. They're wrong, they're aliens, they don't understand us that well, but they think ideally maybe one of the greatest musicians who ever lived. Like, that would be a good start. Secondly, they need somebody who has unbelievable political might. Somebody who, through sheer force of will, can just take this whole legislative mess and reverse it. And they're thinking, Bono. And then they're like, yeah, no, we can do better than that. And as they're researching this situation, they discover that the most powerful media law firm on Earth is called Carter, Geller, and Marks. And at Carter, Geller, and Marks, there is a young attorney named Nick Carter. And they're like, bingo, Bono Schmano, we got ourselves a Backstreet Boy. For those of you who don't know, there's a Backstreet Boy named Nick Carter. And I actually didn't know that myself when I started writing this book. You can imagine my surprise, like 4 chapters into it. And I was like, oh, wait, I can use this. So they go down to Earth and they reveal themselves to this alien delegation, and they reveal themselves to Nick Carter. And they soon discover, to their absolute horror, that this is not the Backstreet Boy. This guy actually hates the Backstreet Boys because he has taste. And secondly, he's not the all-powerful founder of this incredibly powerful law firm. He just happens to have the same very common last name as the founder of this law firm, and he's just a very low-level and not particularly good copyright lawyer. And so the aliens are mortified, but the Rubicon has been crossed, the die is cast, Lohan is into the Smirnoff, pick your analogy. They're now stuck with this here Nick Carter guy, and now Nick Carter has 48 hours to reverse this entire mess, or something very, very bad may just happen to the Earth. Now, I've just summarized the first 4 pages of my book, and I can pretty much summarize the next 353 pages with 3 simple words: hilarity hopefully ensues. Now, just a little bit of background. Some of it was already mentioned. I am an entrepreneur as well as being a writer. And the only company of any consequence at all that I started was called Listen.com, and we did build a Rhapsody music service. And Rhapsody was the first service to license all of the catalogs of the then 5 major record labels. We're down to like 2.5 major record labels now. And we built an online music service that is still quite big today. And so in starting and helping to build that company, I learned far more than I cared to about how copyright law works. And what I learned was that, how do I put this? When a media lobbying organization and a senator love each other very much, they go off to a private place, and several months later we have the bastard mutant spawn that we call copyright law. And so I have a certain perspective on this subject, and that's definitely present and represented in this book. But what I'd say is, although there is definitely a serious socio-political dimension to the book, it is actually what I would call optional. Much as you can read a Michael Crichton book, let's say, and not know or care about genomics or virology, but treat that aspect of the story as sort of the dynamic that gets the story in motion. If you're in that 99% of humanity that is not particularly fascinated by subjects of copyright law, it's not going to be, this isn't a political screed or a political sermon. It's present, it's there, but it's not something that is dominating the entire book. If, on the other hand, you do find issues of piracy and digital copyright to be interesting, and I happen to be among those people, there is actually a lot of substance in the book that is present. But again, it's optional. I think for the vast majority of people who read it, it's really going to be, essentially a high-energy science fiction farce. Oh, and I should point out, it is a comedic book. It is not an entirely serious one. That's probably evident by now. Now, when I got ready to go on this little tour, the book came out 2.5 weeks ago, and I'm making probably about a dozen appearances, most of them public, a couple at Google and Facebook and fun things like this. I was talking to the publicity person at Random House, my publisher, and I was like, I'm really excited for these readings. He's like, readings are great. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, tell me what it's all about. And so he starts going through the rules of doing a good reading and all this other stuff. And rule number 1 was, whatever you do, don't read anything. Because it will just be awkward. It make people get anxious. Rob, you've got a lot of footnotes. Those don't work so well. And so up until now, I've obeyed this rule. But tonight, I'm going to take a chance, because here we are in San Francisco, and this is, an experimental city. So I am going to read for maybe about 3 minutes, because I'm not taking that much of a chance. But I'm going to read to you from the beginning of the book, the very, very beginning of the book, the prologue, which I call Chapter 0 in the book. And I kind of like it because it sets things up. And if this is just an utterly failed experiment, then I'll never, ever do it again. You'll forever be able to tell people, like, I was there the night they tried, or he tried.